Watch out, it's a live mic.
This is Mark McNeese in New York City, and you're listening to another edition of the Live Mic Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. This is Mark on it's dark out. I was going to say on a nice October evening, but it's dark out now. I know you're out there in Arizona.
Yeah, it's 3:30 afternoon here.
Oh, so it's not dark.
Yep.
No, it's getting dark really quick here now, and then we're going to change the clocks in a couple weeks. I think the early first week in November, so that's when it gets to, you leave work and it seems like midnight.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, it's really good to have you back on again to the podcast. You're a recurring guest and a columnist for retirefabulously.com. I love your columns. I tell everybody you should read these. These are I just find them so informative and so real about the experience of retiring. It's that you're not like cranking out stuff. You know what I mean? You really put out very well thought out and well experienced columns. So let's get right to it. We're going to talk about your column that you did recently about being willing to change in retirement. Can we move into that and explain that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it really occurred to me, but almost like one of those, being hit over the head kind of thoughts. The light bulb goes off and it's like, oh, enlightenment here. It really occurred to me that I talk a lot about, setting goals for yourself and a lot of exercises for envisioning what you want your retirement to look like, whether it's you're traveling a lot or whether you're going to pursue music or art or whatever more, or in my case, become a writer is a big one for me. But all these things about your life that, now that you're retired, or as I often like to call it, a renaissance, you can reinvent yourself and have your life be truly the way you want it. I talk a lot about all that stuff, but then it occurs to me that in order to do a lot of that stuff, you really have to be willing to change how you live during your day-to-day life. And what I found happening with me is, of course, for my entire career, I've had a job in corporate America. And so that kind of dictates, what time you get up, what time you're supposed to be in at work, what time you get off, and then you come home. And even during your day, your calendar is often dictated by, what meetings you have to go to and what projects are due today. And all those decisions are made for you. And so I have lived, the majority of my life having somebody else set my routines for me and, living in a certain way. And once I stopped working, a great example is, I really want to get more serious about becoming a writer. And I'm sure you can second this, Mark, and anybody else who is a writer will tell you, you have to allocate a certain amount of time every day to your writing. And don't give that up for anything else. Don't let your household chores or this, that, or the other take away from your time that you spend writing every day. And I had fallen into that trap. It's like I'm not used to committing 2 hours of my time to doing any one thing every day. Usually my schedule has been dictated for me, so I have to be willing to change.
Mm-hmm.
And another example is Jeff and I have been talking a lot about downsizing. And part of that equation is moving to a smaller house, and we may not do that for a long time. But what we are very eager to get going with now is just downsizing our possessions, because we have closets full and garages full and attics full of all this stuff that we've accumulated over the lifetime. And for most of my life, I've been used to accumulating and keeping and storing, because you never know when you might need it someday.
Yeah.
Right. And I need to change so that I'm a person who's willing to get rid of something when I no longer need it, maybe not even accumulate something in the first place. I need to change to live my life in a more lean manner, because that's what I say I want to do. So those are just two examples, but um, what I have found, in fact, when I was doing the research for the column you just spoke of, I looked at some studies done by the National Bureau of Labor Management, and they do a lot of studies on how people spend their time, not just during labor, at work, but also in their lives. And some of those studies pertain to older adults. And it found overwhelmingly that once people start working, it removes work out of your day, but then everything else that was already in the day just increases marginally to take up a little bit of that space. With
Mm-hmm.
the exception of TV watching, people watched about 2.5 or 3 hours more TV every day. And so it occurred to me, it's sort of like fishing an ice cube out of a glass of water. All the rest of the remaining water just, swoops in and takes its place as if nothing new's being added. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how most people spend their life. They or their retirements. They stop working, but then everything else was going on in their life just kind of seeps in and takes its place, and they don't change. They don't do anything new.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I would think that being willing to change would also include being willing to change your lifestyle to some extent, because I'm certainly, unless I win the lottery, I'm certainly not going to be able to travel as much as I did when I was making a lot of money. I mean, that's part of, I think, being willing to change.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's very true, and that's a good point too, because a lot of people look forward to their time after they retire as a time when they can travel more. And like I say, you either have to have saved up a lot more money for that, or you need to change and be willing to economize in other ways, like not eat out as often and not buy as much stuff and whatever, so you can still have money to travel, or look into traveling more cheaply. I mean, uh, a good example is, I mean, normally when we travel, I mean, we don't tend to rough it very much. I mean, we stay in hotels and that sort of thing. But if we really wanted to travel more, maybe we'd look into more uh, bed and breakfasts or Airbnbs, or traveling in more economical manners than perhaps we've been used to up to this point.
Now, do you think that what's the dynamic? Do you suppose with a couple, like in terms of being willing to change?
Well,
This just popped into my head because I was realizing that oftentimes there is more than one person involved, and being willing to change can might be especially challenging when you're dealing with another person.
hmm no, that's very true. That dynamic can either work, for you or against you. I mean, for one example, I have given lip service to downsizing some of this junk I've accumulated over the years for quite a while now. In fact, I ran into an old blog post from 2 years ago during my final months of working, when I wrote, gee, after I retire, I'm going to go through all my closets and my attic and all the stuff like that and get rid of all this junk. And it's like, yeah, I said that 2 years ago, and 2 years have come and gone, and that's never happened. But this is something we both want now. And so I have a built-in accountability partner now.
Yeah.
Uh, and the fact that we both want this, I think, is going to make it a lot more likely that we're going to make this change, because we can each hold each other accountable. Another example, though, sort of on the other side, is I'm probably traveling a lot is probably a little higher on my list than it is on Jeff's. And we have dogs, and of course we have a house, and it needs to be maintained and things like that. Uh, so that's sort of a difference. Uh, the part of me who fantasizes about what I would like to do in the coming years would actually like to do something like, go live in Europe for 3 months, or go live in New Zealand for, get an RV and drive up and down New Zealand and see all of it and stuff like that. The more practical side is, yes, we have our dogs, we have our activities we belong to, we have our home that needs to be maintained. So those are things we still sort of need to work out as what we're going to do, to what extent, when we're going to do it, and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Now, more thoughts on that, or would you like to talk about what's coming up for you in 2016?
Well, actually, I think I'd probably said about as much about that as I want. I guess maybe to conclude that topic, uh, I ran into a good quote by um, Andy Warhol, and I don't have it in front of me, so this will be a close paraphrasing, but it's like, you know, people change when they finally decide to change.
Mm-hmm.
Going to change before that, and once they decide to change, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And I really liked that quote. And the other thought that goes along with that is, you'll change when your reason why becomes strong enough. When my reason why is I really want to live in a less cluttered house. I mean, you don't want to see my desk. It's terrible. And when I finally get tired enough of that and I want to live in a less cluttered house, then I will change. So, you will change when your reason why is strong enough.
Yeah, I like that, and I read a quote a couple weeks ago by Hugh Laurie. I don't know how old it is, but he said he was the actor from House and lots of other things. But
Mhm.
he said that he has concluded that there's no point in waiting until one is ready, because he's decided that no one's ever ready for anything, and that you have to just do what the things that you want to do, and
Mhm.
stop waiting until you're ready. Because I think that's really true too. There's so many people that wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and that's how you wake up at 65 or 70 and think, shoot, I sure could have done more things I wanted to do if I hadn't just kept waiting until I was ready.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so um
Oh, I know you. I was going to talk about your plans.
yeah, sure. Actually, and that leads nicely into it. One thing I want to do, starting in the beginning of 2016, is launch a podcast series. I've certainly been motivated and inspired by you, and I know some other, bloggers and so forth that do podcasts as well as blogging, and so I want to give that a try. And I want to focus on finding and interviewing people who are living fabulous retirements. And that can mean anything. That can mean they have reinvented themselves as a writer or a musician or an artist, or that thing that they'd always been passionate about but maybe couldn't pursue during their working years, or people who were out there traveling the world or doing adventurous new things, or just fulfilling their passions and uh, living their Renaissance years, really doing what they want. Uh, and so I'd like to find some of those people, interview them, because I think, number one, everybody likes a good story, and I'm sure these people have great stories, and it's also good inspiration for the rest of us. I mean, if these average, everyday people can take on change and pursue their visions and their passions, why can't the rest of us?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of what I would want to focus on, both with my podcasts and with some of my blog posts as well. Another thing that I'm very excited about, I've hinted at this already in our conversation, but one thing that I have really enjoyed doing more of, or at least I'm on that journey, is becoming a writer. And I'm putting the finishing touches. I'm probably 80 to 90% done with my first book. And for those of you listening to the podcast, Mark has just graciously agreed to edit it for me, and so I feel very fortunate about that. And so the first book, and I actually have this one that's almost done, and then I have a pipeline of ideas for the next 3 or 4. This one, the working title that I pretty well set on is "Design Your Dream Retirement." And that's going to take the angle that some of my blog posts over the past 2 years have taken, and that is actually thinking about how you're going to spend your time after you retire. What are those passions that maybe you've put aside for a long time, and how can you identify those, prioritize, and then make those a reality once you do retire? So that's going to talk a lot about envisioning how you would like to be, how you would like your life to be, and then going forth and making that a reality. Ideas I have for a couple more coming up. One of them is a collection of the stories, the interesting stories that people have about what they've been doing in their retirement. So, in addition to the podcast series, I'm also hopefully gathering content for a future book as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a third one is, sort of deals with a question that I know has already been dealt with a lot, and that is identifying where is the best place for you to retire. And it's going to be more than what you normally see. Top 10 cities in the U.S. to retire, and 10 countries overseas to retire. It's not going to take that angle at all. It's going to take how do you determine what you want, what you value in a place to live, and then go about doing the research and the discovery to find out that place that's really good for you.
Well, it all sounds, fabulous. I'll definitely be one of your listeners to a podcast, and then of course I get to see what you're writing.
So I've got a lot of things to look forward to and some nice goals and dreams for next year, and I'm really looking forward to getting this book finished, because that's going to be checking a goal off my list. It's not like it's going to be the only book I ever write, probably, but getting that first one done and out there. And you can probably verify from your own experience. Once you've done one, it's great to do the second and the third and the fourth, but it's really rewarding to get that first one done, isn't it?
Yes, and then to just put it out there and let it be what it's going to be, and not be overly invested in the results. It's really about, well, I mean, it's sort of, we're talking. I write fiction, so for me, it's really it's also a sense of completion, which it would be for you too, but a sense of, this is done. I've made it the best I can do, the best I could get it, and now it's out there, and then you just sit back and see what happens. But it's a really good sense of accomplishment.
Oh yeah, and I mean, we all hope that our book sells, but even if it doesn't, there's the accomplishment that you contributed something to the world, and also the idea that even if it didn't turn out to be quite as great as you want, you've learned something from it, and the next one can be better.
Yes, it's always everything is a good opportunity to learn. I was thinking of something, and it just came in and out of my head.
Actually, while thinking about it though, let me throw this out there. If anybody who is listening to this podcast has a good story for my podcast, meaning you have retired, you have reinvented yourself in a positive way, you're pursuing your passions, you're living a fantastic retirement, however you define that. I'm looking for a wide variety of stories. So if you're listening to this podcast now and you would be interested in being interviewed on my podcast, I would love to hear from you. And you can contact me at dave@retirefabulously.com. Or if you know somebody, maybe broach the topic to them and put me in touch with them. So I'd certainly like to be able to cast the net out to your listeners for potential interviewees.
Excellent. And that's your website is retirefabulously.com.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And they can read about all the other things you do too, because you officiate weddings.
That's true. Yeah. and one thing to entice people to go to my website and sign up to receive the free updates for whenever I put out a new article. The people who are subscribers to my list will have a small window of time to download my book for free when it first comes out.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, so another bonus for visiting my website and signing up for the list. You get a free book out of the deal.
That's great. So, Dave, it's been really good to have you on again. Any parting thoughts?
I don't think so, just that to thank you again. And I just really appreciate these opportunities to chat with you and uh, provide something that I hope is of value to the LGBT senior audience. And I just really appreciate the support you give and the relationship we've created here. And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, I do too, and I really like it that you let me post slightly condensed versions of your columns at lgbtSr.
Hmm.
So, and we're going to have you on again. You're going to like podcasting. It's really fun, and you meet so many interesting people.
Good. I hope
That's
so.
one of the best things about it is just that I've gotten to meet, sort of, virtually meet lots of really interesting people.
Excellent.
So thanks, Dave, and we'll have you on again in a month or two. And that's it. I'm looking forward to all the good stuff that's coming down from you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.